Shravanam Mananam Nidhidhyasanam. Listen, reflect and absorb. Dear listeners, Sai Ram and welcome to our radio series in which a divine discourse by Bhagawan is played in small parts, and following each part a short discussion is undertaken to reflect on the message. Today's episode was first broadcast live on 24th March 2016. The discourses undertaken for study in this program are from the series of discourses delivered as part of the summer course in Indian Culture and Spirituality, 1991. Have a listen, please.
Offering a most loving pranams at Bhagawan's lotus feet. Dear listeners, we welcome you to this week's Shravanam Mananam Nidhidhyasanam. Those of you who have been following us, you'll know that we were going through the 1991 summer course series. We went through the 1990 summer course series in the last season of Shravanam Mananam Nidhidhyasanam. We completed 2 discourses and we are going to start the 3rd discourse today. And as Swami said in the concluding part of the previous discourse, much more profound topics are going to come and are going to follow in the discourses to come. So Swami was saying that I wish all of you take good rest and come back fresh to be able to assimilate whatever is being offered to you in this platform. And needless to say, this discourse does seem to be a very profound one. But before introducing the discourse itself, let's, as always, have Sai Prakash to join us. Saram Sai Prakash.
Sairam Prem. Let's see what this discourse holds. Although there is this excitement of getting to learn and getting to know something very new, it is again the same eternal wisdom. The only thing that has remained constant over millennia, if I may say, this knowledge of the self is what is the only thing that has remained unchanged.
Right, and as the topic for that discourse goes, it's Tat Tvam Asi.
Yes.
And as we all know, I think most of our listeners would be aware that it's one of the Mahavakyas of the Vedas, and I think it comes from Samaveda.
Okay.
Because there are 4 Mahavakyas, main ones, each one from one of the Vedas.
Yes.
I think the one from Rig Veda is Prajnanam Brahma.
Okay.
Then Tattvamasi is from Samaveda. Then Ayam Atma Brahma is from Atharva Veda, and Aham Brahmasmi is from Yajurveda.
Yes.
Right? That is from Yajurveda.
Okay.
I think it features in the conversation between Uddalaka and Shvetaketu.
Okay.
In that portion it comes. But last discourse we saw, it was such a wonderful discourse where Swami was kind of laying out for us the historical perspective of how man came to wonder at nature to start with, and then the forces behind nature which were unseen,
yes,
which were actually animating the seen part of nature, and then goes on to explore God and worship Him with humility. And eventually, it's so fascinating that, it cannot be a wild imagination to come up with a statement like Tattvamasi.
Very true.
Right? You're
Very
talking about God, and finally you say that, that divinity which I am in awe of is actually one with me.
Yes.
It cannot be an accident, it cannot be a fantasy either.
Very true. In fact, when Swami was describing the sages, how with their sincerity, how they explored and how they realized and experienced the truth, it's, an act of absolute selflessness that they chose to come back and share it with the rest of humanity. So we have done this and we have seen Him, we have experienced Him. Now you all share this joy, share this knowledge. And I think it's similar to the story which Ramakrishna Paramahamsa used to say. It's like a huge wall, and somebody asked him, how does a realized man live, and who are prophets? He says, on this side is the worldly way of living, and on the other side is complete realization. So when you cross the wall and you go to the other side, it's just not possible to come back on this side. You're just lost in the other side of the wall. But there are a few prophets and sages and avatars who chose to come back and then help others cross the wall.
Right.
So it's like that. And the way Swami was beautifully bringing out what the sages have contributed with their sincere, earnest dedication. Leading on to this discourse, it is just as if Swami has said that this is what the evolution of human thinking is, and they reached a level of understanding which is of course beyond the level of the senses, and which is only experiential in its nature. And what was that experience is what is taken up in this chapter.
Right, and it's very fascinating when you talk about this being the Mahavakya from Samaveda. As we know, Rig Veda and Samaveda is very similar in their content, in the sense of they are in awe and in praise of the Lord. And that's why Rig Veda is all the time. He is the splendor of 1,000 suns, and he's beyond this and he's beyond that.
Right.
So it's almost like that part of the discourse which we saw last week, where Swami is saying that man starts giving numerous names for this principle of divinity.
Right.
The Rig Veda is actually a collection of such thought and such feelings of man. Mm-hmm. And when Swami speaks about the Mahavakyas, especially speaks about Vedanta, Swami would say that the entire Vedas, the Brahmanas aspect of the Vedas, is taken and it's filtered, and finally you get the Vedanta. Right?
Yes.
And which is represented by the Upanishads. And then Swami would say, when you take the Upanishads and further filter them, each of these Vedas give one line, and that's a Mahavakya.
That's the Mahavakya.
That's and the Mahavakya for Samaveda, which Samaveda stands for looking at divinity in awe and giving him all kinds of glorious names and praising him. When you filter it, finally comes to this one line which says, that brilliant form I'm talking about, that brilliant being I'm talking about, I'm one with that being.
Very true.
How is this journey possible, and how is it even understandable? Of course, I think it's a journey which each one has to take. But at the same time, how do you even explain it to a person?
In fact, when you say how do you explain it to a person, what strikes me is an example which Swami often gave in many of his discourses.
Okay.
He says, here is a sculptor who is actually carving out the image of Lord Krishna from a stone. And beautiful statue of Lord Krishna emerges from the stone. And as he's completing his work, a sage is walking by, and he's asked, what is this concept of Tattvamasi?
Okay.
The sage says, those small bits of stone which are chipped out from the stone and thrown on the road, which are not part of the statue, they say, Tattvamasi. I am also that. I am also part of the statue. We are from the same stone. The statue and me, we are from the same stone.
Beautiful.
I am left outside, but I am part of Tattvamasi. I am that. Isn't it beautiful?
In fact, even as you're saying that, I'm reminded of what the example that Swami gave in the previous series, 1990. Swami speaks about Potana.
That's right.
And his composition of the Bhagavatam.
Yes.
And that verse which Swami would very often quote, that it's written on praise of Lord Rama. The one who has written it is Sri Rama himself.
Yes.
The Bhagavatam itself is that Lord Rama.
Correct.
I think there's a verse like that.
Yes.
Swami would say that this verse stands for Tattvamasi.
Right.
And Swami explains in that Tat is the composer of that Bhagavatam.
Correct.
Tvam is the one who is praised through the Bhagavatam, and Asi is the work, the Bhagavatam itself.
Composition itself.
And all three is one. And Swami said, how beautifully Swami synthesizes this intellectual pinnacle of achievement,
right,
and that devotional and humility based achievement.
Yeah, they are not separate in a sense, but it needs Bhagawan to explain it to us.
Right. And in fact, Swami would very often say that the triad of Bhakti, Jnana and Vairagya, Swami would say. There can't be Bhakti without Jnana and Vairagya. You can't say that I'll continue to be a lover of the Lord and keep praising, and you can't help that in that perfection of that Bhakti, Jnana will come in.
Right.
Okay, and that Bhakti cannot be fortified if not for Vairagya.
Very true.
And Swami would say that same is the case with Jnana. You can't achieve that perfect Jnana if Bhakti is not entered your heart.
Very true.
And of course, it's a new discourse, and I'm sure that this is going to be as interesting as the previous one. But interestingly, as we said the last week, when we played that last part, Swami says that it's a very heavy subject. We'll cut down a few classes for you so that you can be fresh. And interestingly, this is the 23rd of May, 1991, this discourse. So it appears like Swami has given a day's break because the previous discourse was 21st May.
Oh, okay.
So I think Swami has not only given an afternoon off, Swami must have given a day off, and I mean quite understandably, because the discourses to follow, the topics themselves make us sit up straight.
That's true.
Right. So I think we'll start with the first clip and we'll see what Swami has to say in that introduction.
కానుపించెడి జగతిలో కానరాక కానుపించెడి జగతిలో కానరాక అందు వెలుగొందు చైతన్యమాత్మరూపు మణుల యందున సూత్రంబు మాదిరిగను విశ్వమంతట నిండెను విశ్వవిభుడు కానుపించెడి జగతిలో కానరాక అందు వెలుగొందు చైతన్యమాత్మరూపు మణుల యందున సూత్రంబు మాదిరిగను విశ్వమంతయు వ్యాప్తి అయి విశ్వవిభుడు విశ్వమంతయు వ్యాప్తి అయి విశ్వవిభుడు విశ్వమంతయు విశ్వమంతయు నిండిన విశ్వవిభుడు.
In this world which is apparent, he is not seen. God is in the form of Atma all over the universe. Like he is in the form of Chaitanya, just as the thread that passes through precious gems, God is pervading all over the universe.
ప్రేమ స్వరూపులారా,
Embodiments of love.
సర్వం కలివిదం బ్రహ్మ, ఇది సమస్త ఉపనిషత్తుల యొక్క సారం.
The essence of Upanishads is that the entire cosmos is full of Brahman.
చరాచర ప్రపంచమంతయుకుడను ఈ చిన్న పదమునందే ఇమిడి ఉంటున్నవి.
The movable and the immovable in this world contains this essential principle.
బ్రహ్మము కానటువంటిది ఈ జగత్తునందు కానరాదు.
In this world there is nothing which is not Brahman.
కట్టెలందున నిప్పులు కలిగినట్లు తెలలయందున తైలము పెరుగునట్లు ఎందు చూచిన దైవంబే నిండియుండే. కట్టెలందున నిప్పులు కలిగినట్లు తెలలయందున తైలంబు పెరుగునట్లు ఎందు చూచిన దైవంబు నిండియుండే.
Just there is fire contained in the firewood and the oil in the seeds, we find God all over.
కనుక దైవము కానిది ఈ జగత్తులో కానరాదు.
Therefore in this world there is nothing which is not divinity.
దైవం యొక్క శాసనంను పురస్కరించుకొనియే సృష్టి స్థితి లయములు కూడాను జరుగుతున్నవి.
Basing on God's command only, the creation, the sustenance and annihilation are based.
మానవుడు నమ్మినను నమ్మకపోయిన కూడాను ఈ జగత్తనేటువంటి చక్రము దైవ శాసనం వలనే తిరుగుచున్నది.
The wheel of time rotates by the will of God, whether you believe it or not.
కాలచక్రమునకు కర్త దైవమే.
The creator for this wheel of time is God himself.
కానీ ఈ కాలమును ఏ విధముగా మానవుడు వినియోగించాలి, ఏ విధముగా ఈ కాలము పవిత్రము గావించుకోవాలి అనేటువంటి సత్యాన్ని మానవుడు మర్చిపోతున్నాడు.
Man has forgotten as to how to make use of this time in a precious way and to make use of it in a sacred way.
సూర్యుడు ప్రకాశిస్తున్నాడు,
Sun shines.
చంద్రుడు తన చల్లదనాన్ని జగత్తునకు అందిస్తున్నాడు.
All the coolness to this world is given by moon.
వర్షములు కురియుచున్నవి.
There are rains.
ప్రవాహములు ప్రవహించుచున్నవి.
Rivers flow.
పంటలు పండుచున్నవి.
The crops also grow.
ఇవన్నీ కూడాను ఏ ఒక్క మానవుని నిమిత్తమై ఏర్పడినటువంటివి కాదనే సత్యాన్ని ప్రతి వ్యక్తి కూడాను గుర్తించడం అత్యవసరము.
Every individual has to recognize the fact we find these things not because of any single individual.
ఈ ప్రకృతి యందు జన్మించినటువంటి ప్రతి మానవునికి దీనిని అనుభవించేటువంటి దీంట్లో సమానమైన అధికారం ఉంటున్నది.
Every man has got a birthright to enjoy that what all contained in this world.
కానీ ఇట్టి సత్యాన్ని మానవుడు విస్మరించినాడు.
But man has forgotten that fact.
సమత్వమైనటువంటి యోగమును మానవుడు ఏనాడు కూడాను అర్థం చేసుకున్నటకు ప్రయత్నించటం లేదు.
Man has not made any effort to understand the principle of
ఈ
equality.
నిర్లిప్తమైనటువంటి యొక్క భావము పసిపాపల యందు మాత్రమే కనిపించుచున్నది.
That spirit of equality is present among children.
తల్లి పాలను త్రాగి చల్లని గాలిని పీల్చి కమ్మని కంఠముతో పాడేటువంటి తల్లి యొక్క జోలపాటలకు మురిసి తన యొక్క మనసును మరచి మధుర భావములో మునిగేటువంటి యొక్క భావము పసిపిల్లల యందు మాత్రమే కనిపించుచున్నది.
Children take milk from mother and enjoy the cool breeze and also get into the sleep enjoying the lullaby of mother.
కానీ మానవుడు పెరుగు కొలది తన పర అనేటువంటి భేదములు పుట్టుచున్నవి.
As man grows, he develops this feeling of I, mine and thine.
స్వార్థములు పెరుగుచున్నది.
The selfishness is on the rise.
త్యాగము తరుగుచున్నది.
The sacrifice on the decline.
మానవత్వమే మరుగుపడుతున్నది.
The human values disappear.
కారణమేమిటి?
What's the reason?
ఆత్మవిశ్వాసమును కోల్పోవటమే.
The absence of self-confidence.
సర్వత్రా ఉన్నటువంటి యొక్క శక్తి సర్వేశ్వర శక్తి అనేటువంటి యొక్క తత్వాన్ని విస్మరించటమే.
He has forgotten the fact that the power of the divinity is spread all over.
అంతర్బహిర్త సర్వవ్యాప్య నారాయణ స్థితః అని తన యందును తన వెలుపల తన చుట్టూ సర్వత్రా సర్వకాలముల యందు కూడాను వ్యాపించుతున్నటువంటి యొక్క దివ్యత్వాన్ని మానవుడు అర్థం చేసుకున్నటకు తగిన ప్రయత్నం చేయటం లేదు.
Man is not making an appropriate effort to understand that the divinity is in him, around him, all over. He has not made any attempt to realize the truth.
జగత్తులో ధనవంతులు కలరు.
In this world there are rich people.
బలవంతులు కలరు.
There are strong ones.
గుణవంతులు కలరు.
There are men of character.
విద్యావంతులు కలరు.
There are educated people.
కానీ ఆత్మవంతులు కానరావటం లేదు.
But we don't find people with realization of Atman.
ఆత్మవంతులనగా ఏమిటి?
What do you mean by the one realized?
శరీరము కనిపిస్తుంది.
The body is apparent.
మనసు ఉన్నట్టుగా అనిపిస్తుంది.
The mind appears as if it exists.
కానీ ఆత్మ కానరాదు.
But Atma is not visible.
కానరాని ఆత్మను కనిపించినట్టు చేసుకొని ఆ ఆనందములో తాను తన్మత్తుడై ఉన్మత్తుడై దివ్యత్వాన్ని అనుభవించినటువంటి వాడే ఆత్మవంతుడు.
He is really the realized one if he understands and then sees that Atma which is not apparent, which is hidden, that he intoxicates himself enjoying the beauty of Atma.
ఇట్టి ఆత్మవంతులు ప్రాచీన కాలమునందు అనేక మంది మహర్షులు ఈ దివ్యమైనటువంటి భావాన్ని, దివ్యమైనటువంటి యొక్క రసమును, దివ్యమైనటువంటి శక్తిని అనుభవించి ఆనందించి జగత్తుకు అందిస్తూ వచ్చారు.
The ancient saints realized this Atman, they enjoyed and then propagated the principle of Atman to everyone in this world.
That was the first clip, and Swami starts off as always with a very beautiful poem there, where he says, the world is visible, but invisible like the world is that consciousness, the Atman, which shines. And Swami gives that analogy of the thread which is unseen, and similar to that, the creator who permeates the whole universe is unseen.
Right. In fact, even this example of the sutra, the thread between the gems, is there in Bhagavad Gita as well. Very beautifully Lord Krishna says, I am the thread that goes through all in the necklace.
Right.
That
and
holds all the gems together.
Some of these examples are, I think, classic examples, especially in this Vedantic concepts.
Yes.
But I think it's so obvious. Many times, we end up asking these questions. How can you believe in God? You've never seen. How can you believe in concepts which you're not able to verify for yourself?
Right.
Some of these things are actually perfect analogies for that, because nobody questions. When you see a necklace of pearls, I think it is a tacit understanding that there is a thread behind it. No
true.
one ever can think otherwise.
Right.
I don't think even if you pass that necklace of pearls through 100 hands, not one of them might have seen the thread, but everybody would agree that there is a thread behind. But when it comes to God, we always tend to become wise rationalists and ask questions.
No, I think my understanding of the problem is that with the limited scope of the senses, we logically try to analyze and get a proof for the existence of God. But we are not able to take a step which is beyond the realm of our senses.
Right.
I think
going back to that same example of pearls, somebody would say that it can be proved if you can break open the necklace, then you will see the thread behind. So let us say that there are some restrictions for you to do that. I go into a jewelry shop. Obviously, he's not going to allow me to break it open and see if the thread is there.
Right.
So there are some restrictions because of which I can't perform that experiment of mine to see whether it is there or not. I think that's the same thing with human intellect too. Can it be verified? Yes, it can be. But right now in the state you are with your, caged up in your vasanas, I don't think we'll be able to do it right away. But there is definitely a process for that.
Maybe just as you have to break the necklace, you have to break out through all your accepted notions.
Right.
And you have to do that. I mean, you have to have that sincerity and that approach of inquiry.
Right.
Only then you can see the thread underneath the pearls.
Right.
These are, I think, Upanishadic examples where we see fire is latent in wood and oil is latent in the seeds. So also God is present wherever we turn. As we have discussed, and I think even in the 1990 series, Swami said that the Puranas are all written to explain this beautiful truth to common man. When we actually talk of the story of Prahalada, for example, he's there in the pillar. I mean, it is his faith that brings the Lord to manifest through that pillar. With that complete faith, when he says, yes, the Lord is in the pillar, and his father hits the pillar, the Lord has to manifest, because that is the power of his faith and conviction.
Right. I think that's extraordinary faith, because you can understand if God manifests for you because of your faith.
Right.
If you can make God manifest for others out of your faith.
Correct.
And in fact, I think in Premavani, in the first few chapters, Swami mentions that. I mean, towards the end, not the first few, towards the end, Swami mentions how the avatar manifests.
Okay.
So in that part, Swami says, a description of a few people who are devotees, because of whose prayer God manifests.
Right.
And Swami says that, their faith and their love and devotion is so strong that they end up manifesting the Lord in a form which even people who are not of their level of purity can enjoy.
Oh, Swami actually mentions that.
Because I can understand if somebody like Mother Meera sat and sang and Krishna manifested in front of her.
Right.
But manifesting in a form which even the others around could see.
See, that's true.
To make Hiranyakashipu see the Lord you have faith in.
That's true. It's amazing. See, he says everything, this beautiful concept of time, where he says everything is sustained by the Lord. Time, the passage of time is definitely in the Lord's hands. And, this is another manifestation of the Lord. Time itself. When Swami says time is God, don't waste time, time is God. It's in the simplest form that we can accept, we can understand. But it's so profound, because one moment lost is not got back again.
Right. And when you say time is God, it's so easy to relate to God as time, because time is not something which you can see. It's not something which you can probably hold in your hand and say this time.
Right.
But we operate on time.
Right.
In that sense, when Swami makes that statement, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. Whatever we are talking about, whatever we are referring to, it's all based on and around time. And I think that's a very important thing that Swami is making in this paragraph, where he's saying, God has created time. God has created the cycle of time. And now almost like the riddle in front of you is, what do you do so that this time is sanctified, or this time is spent in a meaningful way?
Correct.
And then, of course, Swami goes on to speak about the purity of children. Right?
Very, very beautiful example, because he says everybody born on earth has the equal right to enjoy the bounty of nature. And he says that level of selflessness is seen only in the children, because they surrender to their mother, and they live with the milk and the food. They are equal. One child will never think that he is more special than the other child.
Right.
They just feel one. So that childlike selfless attitude, I think, is what Swami is trying to bring out here.
In fact, I think Swami has said this many times. When you talk about Atma, later Swami speaks about those who are established in the Atma. Swami would ask, what are the qualities of that Atma? Okay, one thing which we can think of is tranquility and equanimity. But actually, it's difficult to put both together. Tranquility is like a state of Sthita Prajna. But Swami says there is also bliss.
Ananda. Very true.
Ananda is the nature of the Atma.
Yes.
And whenever Swami would explain that, Swami would say, if you look at children, you will know that Ananda.
Right.
And I think as they grow up, as Swami is mentioning here, as they grow up, they've been conditioned to believe that if you have this, you can be happy. If you don't have this, you're not supposed to be happy. I think we learned to be unhappy, because otherwise it's crying is just an expression of saying that I need this. For a baby, if a baby cries, it's only an expression of discomfort. And that expression of discomfort is so spontaneous. You're not trained to believe that this means discomfort for me.
Right.
And I think that is what happens as you grow up, saying that, you are having this, you don't have this, or what you have is not as good as what somebody else has.
As Swami says, as you start growing up, selfishness and sacrifice starts disappearing, and then you start getting into the feelings of mine and yours and theirs.
Right.
So that slowly gets in. A slight digression from here, but there was an interesting discussion about a way of eradicating poverty.
Okay.
For example, this concept of basic minimum salary for everybody. It's a universal. So one of the concepts which have been prevalent for a long time is redistribute your wealth in such a way that every living human being gets a basic minimum income. Basic minimum income per month, or however you want to do it. So there is no poverty. And it is possible. So there was a lot of discussion on the pros and cons of it. Will people stop working? And what will happen if just easy money is available? And what will they do? So, it's like whatever we are doing today, okay, you talk of oil, you talk of coal, you talk of, it's nature's bounty.
Right.
And here Swami is making the statement that everybody has equal right over it. But because of man-made distinctions of rich and poor, and I own this. That's what Swami says. You start saying mine and thine and yours and mine. So somebody buys a land. So how can he say that everything under that land belongs to him? If there is a water table stretching around from his land to somebody else's land, will he go right to the core of the earth and say, no, this part of the underground water is mine? It's not possible. And I think that kind of understanding also brings about this concept of sharing and sacrifice, as Swami is saying.
Right.
So the moment we sacrifice and share the resources, then there is enough for everybody.
Yeah, talking about redistribution of wealth, and of course it's been a topic. I think it's an expression of man's compassion. We all go through it. You can be happy with you having everything, but the pain of seeing somebody not having it always is something which moves you. And I think that is what has driven this idea of redistributing wealth.
Exactly.
And one of the things which invariably comes as a final understanding, be it with the experiments like communism, and socialism, one of the things which eventually comes, democracy is probably one of the evolved states which, as of now, we have hit upon. Can definitely be better. But the idea of democracy is you can't create equal wealth. Money can't be distributed equally. Resources can't be distributed equally. But you can ensure that there is equal opportunity.
That's true.
You create an environment where each one, if he or she chooses, can get the same amount which somebody else can when they choose and put the same amount of effort in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree, except for the fact that most of the jobs today are being taken away by technology.
It doesn't happen. So that is a equilibrium which is constantly, they try to achieve it. I mean, it sounds like a better way of distributing opportunities is better than distributing resources. If you look at it, I think that's exactly what it is from God's point of view.
Correct.
I mean, of course, for God, it is not about wealth and money and resources. But if you think that knowing one's own self, knowing one's own is the greatest wealth one can achieve. I think that's what God has done. He has created a field where it's equal opportunity for everybody. If I start doing the sadhana, which Swami has said, I think in whatever prescribed ways, I think the ability for me to achieve it is probably exactly as much as it was for somebody like Sage Vasishta or Vishwamitra.
Exactly. For God, He has given equal opportunity. He has just given you the equal background. It's up to you how you develop and grow.
And I think that's where God's equality lies. We often do this, somebody, we see a hungry child, we see somebody suffering, we say, oh, God is unequal. God gives more to somebody and less for somebody. But actually God is equal this way, because there is equal opportunity. If you want to get up and pick yourself up now, as Swami said, awake and arise. I think it's the same distance from my goal to me to anybody's goal to themselves.
And the beauty is the next sentence where Swami says, what is the cause for all this? This is because of lack of Atma Vishwasa. He says, because of lack of faith in the Atma and faith in oneself, that is the reason for all these problems. How true it is. If I am living with the awareness and with the complete understanding that you and I are one, I would like to give you as many resources and as much of happiness as I would like to give myself.
Sometime back, we were having a discussion about what's purposeful living, what's meaningful living. And I think that there again is this thing which Swami is mentioning about Atma Vishwasam lacking, which is being the cause. For most people, I think that is what it is. When you compare your purposefulness with somebody else's purposefulness, your life, whether it is being as meaningful as somebody else's life, I think that is where we lack out. This Atma Vishwasam, self-confidence, to believe that if Swami has created the same God has created you and me, He has created us with the same purpose. And invariably, if you see, for living the most purposeful life, you have to go to the real purpose. Even if you're going to be leading a life which benefits 1,000 poor people or a lakh poor people, sometime you'll have to turn to this true purpose of life.
Very true. And then here again, Swami defines how is such a realized person, how does he live in this world? He says, he has the body just like anybody else's body. He even appears to have a mind. But he's completely tuned to the Atman. And then he is engrossed in the Atman and full of Ananda, full of bliss. So one thing which obviously is recognizable in a realized soul is that he is always in bliss. This form of bliss is what drives every activity of his, is a spontaneous gesture. See, even Bhagawan, when you see him, when he's talking to a child, when he's throwing things, when he's speaking, every act is so spontaneous. There is nothing planned about it. He just flows in that moment. And that is a sign of absolute Ananda or bliss. So he who is always in that form of bliss, he just does everything with love. That's all it is.
I mean, you're not thinking about drawing the best out of any moment.
Exactly. Every moment is...
Otherwise, no, anything we do, if you talk to a person, meet a person and, get into a venture, all the time we are thinking of how much can I draw from that, event or that time. I think for Swami, it's not like that, because there's, when there is completeness, you're only giving, you're not taking. I think that is what happens when Swami says that somebody who is established in the Atma is absolutely no need of taking. And, if you talk about Aham Brahmasmi, I think when we were reading about that, we came across Yajurveda is supposed to be a Veda of, performing sacrifices, performing worship in a way that you can get what you want. Okay, the whole of Yajurveda is about that, how do you systematically please this God and that God and get what you want. The essence of that Veda is Aham Brahmasmi. Saying that you don't need, you're complete by yourself. And that's precisely what Swami is saying, that person who is established in that Atma is in that state of bliss, who doesn't need anything from the world, who can just be there. Probably he appears to be using the world. As Swami says, he appears to have a mind, he appears to have a body, appears to be, living on the thing, but totally unattached. Very
interestingly, one of the conclusions that came out from that debate about a common currency, and also another debate where they were talking of whether, I think possibly in the same debate, what's happening to technology. I mean, technology is really taking over human jobs. One conclusion which comes to there, what will people do when they have nothing to do? If technology has taken over your job, if a piece of land has to farming is to be done, or harvesting, sowing seeds, the machines are able to do it much more efficiently than what humans can do, and faster and quicker. So when everything is taken care of, you don't have to worry about your own money as well. When everything is provided, what will happen to human beings? One of the answers which came out was very interesting. They said the only thing that can happen is man will start going within himself. His thinking will go deeper into the purpose of life and to try to understand himself. So that was one conclusion which came to, when God created the universe, he gave equal opportunities to everybody, and man has ruined it with his inequality. But even man comes to the same conclusion, that what if you provide a basic minimum for everybody, and they don't have to worry about their food, they don't have to worry about their basic necessities, then what? Inevitably it comes to the same thing, that once you are provided with for basic things, you start turning inwards. I can't help but just add this statement here, because Swami has told often, there's a poem in Telugu, I don't know the exact, he says, if you have that faith and confidence in the Lord, you may be in any part of the world, you may be in a forest, in a village or this thing, if you pursue the path of spiritual sadhana, the Lord will take care of you. Means when the Lord could create this entire universe, don't you think he can take care of you?
That's what I mean. But when we look at it, I think this kind of a scientific progress where more of your time is freed, I think it's already happened if you compare it with 100 years ago, 200 years ago.
Right.
Or from Dwapara Yuga to Kali Yuga.
Correct.
It's already happened. I think the lesson is the kind of conditioning which you are put through. And I think that's a very important point, because as we all are living in the world today, we can see it, that our jobs are being taken away by machines, and we're going to have more free time. So it is more important for us to now start conditioning already.
Correct.
That what is the most important thing in life, so that as you get more and more freed, I think more and more, as you said, you'll turn inward. Otherwise, I think the other possibility also is there. Turn and look for other ways of making yourself happy.
Right. No, because there was a beautiful documentary made by the Mumbai Sai organization, in which one of the youth says, he was not a devotee of Swami, and he says, every weekend I would go to the mall, I would go to a movie, and after a few weeks, I just got so vexed up with that. Is this what enjoyment is? He says, when I come here and serve, when I participate in this is addictive. He says, I don't want to give up this at the cost of anything else. The kind of joy and bliss I get in service, he says, I cannot get it anywhere else. I think that speaks there is this mall-going culture and this, weekend we go for a movie, we go out and have food. Fine. How many weeks are you going to do it? And inevitably it comes back to something higher, something more subtler, something which is more, long-lasting.
Right. Something which takes an involvement from us. At the same time, it gives happiness.
Very true.
That's what. So we'll go to the next clip.
Yes.
And let's see what Swami says in that.
ప్రాకృతమైనటువంటి మానవునకు ఈ పరతత్వాన్ని బోధించే నిమిత్తమై అనేక ఉపనిషత్తులందు ఉన్నటువంటి యొక్క భావములను క్రోడీకరించుకొని వీటిని త్రికోణము అనేటువంటి స్వరూపకంగా ధరింపజేసి జగత్తునకు చాటుతూ వచ్చారు.
They started propagating this doctrine of Atma, taking from Upanishads and explained in a triangular fashion.
ఒకటి శరీరం,
One is the body,
రెండవది మనస్సు,
the second is mind,
మూడవది ఆత్మ.
the third is Atma.
శరీరము స్థూలము,
The body is gross,
ఆత్మ సూక్ష్మము.
the mind is subtle.
ఈ స్థూలము సూక్ష్మము అయినటువంటి శరీరమునకు ఆత్మకు సమన్వయమును కావించి రెండింటినీ కూర్చి చేర్చి ఆనందింపజేసినటువంటిది మనస్సు.
The gross body and the subtle Atma have been united and jointed and coordinated by the mind that stands in between.
ఈ మూడింటి యొక్క సమన్వయం యొక్క ప్రతిపాదనే తత్వము అని నిరూపించారు.
The integration and the coordination of the three is nature or tattva.
ఈ తత్వము అనేటువంటి యొక్క సత్యాన్ని మానవుడు సరిగా అర్థం చేసుకోవటం లేదు.
Man is not understanding properly the meaning of tattva or the nature.
తత్ త్వం. తత్ అనగా అది,
Tat means that.
త్వం అనగా ఇది,
Tvam meant this.
అది అనగా మనం గుర్తించవలసినది ఏమిటి?
That means what? What is it to be realized?
మనకు దూరముగా ఉన్నటువంటి దానిని దట్ అంటాము.
That which is away from you is called that.
దగ్గరగా ఉండినటువంటి దానిని దిస్ అంటాము.
That which is quite near to you is called this.
దేనికి దూరముగా ఉన్నది, దేనికి దగ్గరగా ఉన్నది?
To what is it? It is distant. To what it is nearby.
మన ఇంద్రియములకు దూరముగా ఉన్నటువంటి దానిని దట్ అన్నాడు.
That which is far off from senses is that.
మన ఇంద్రియములకు సమీపంగా ఉన్నటువంటి దానిని దిస్ అన్నారు.
That which is close to senses is this.
కనుక ఇంద్రియములకు సమీపంగా ఉన్నటువంటిది జీవితము అనగా దేహమే.
The body is quite close to the senses. That is deha or the body.
మన ఇంద్రియములకు దూరముగా ఉన్నటువంటి యొక్క తత్ అనేటువంటిది ఆత్మ.
That which is far away from the body or senses is
దూరముగా
that
ఉన్నటువంటి
atma.
యొక్క ఆత్మను
That atma which is far off
దగ్గరగా ఉన్నటువంటి దేహముతో
and the body which is quite close.
అసి కలపటమే మనసు యొక్క స్వభావము.
Mixing both is the nature of the mind.
దీనినే తత్ త్వం అసి అని పిలుస్తూ వచ్చారు.
This is called that thou art, tat tvamasi.
కనుక మానవత్వములో ఈ శరీరము, మనసు, ఆత్మల యొక్క మూడింటి యొక్క సమ్మిళిత స్వరూపాన్ని మనము గుర్తించడానికి ప్రయత్నించాలి.
Therefore in man we should make an attempt to understand the very form and the nature of body, mind
తత్వమసి
and
అనగా
atma.
ప్రత్యేకమైనటువంటి యొక్క అర్థం ఏమీ లేదు.
Tattvamasi has no separate meaning.
అది ఇది చేరినటువంటిదే తత్వమసి.
Tattvamasi is a mixture of that and this.
అనగా అతీతమైనటువంటి యొక్క ఆత్మతో,
That atma which is transcendent,
అనుభవ రూపమైనటువంటి దేహముతో
the body that experiences,
ఏకత్వాన్ని అనుభవించి
experiencing unity,
దివ్యత్వాన్ని పొందటమే.
one should attain divinity.
తదుపరి జీవుడు, దేవుడు, ప్రకృతి, ఇది మూడు కూడాను మరొక కోణంగా నిర్మించుకుంటూ వచ్చారు.
From the other point of view, there are these three things: the individual, God, and Prakriti, the world.
ఈ మూడింటి యొక్క సారాంశమును రక్తి, భుక్తి, ముక్తి అని కూడాను ఏర్పరచుకుంటూ వచ్చారు.
The essence of these three things can be said as Rakti, Bhukti, and Mukti.
రక్తి ఏమిటది?
What is meant by Rakti?
ఈ జగత్తే మనకు రక్తి.
This world is Rakti.
భుక్తి, ఈ దేహమునకు భుక్తి అత్యవసరము.
Bhukti, food is necessary for the body.
ముక్తి స్వరూపమే ఆత్మ.
the liberated one, mukti.
కనుక ప్రతి మానవునికి కూడాను రక్తి, భుక్తి, ముక్తి అత్యవసరమని కూడాను ఈ తత్వం అసి బోధిస్తూ వచ్చింది.
The Tattvamasi teaches that every man needs rakti, bhukti and mukti.
స్థూలము, సూక్ష్మము, కారణము.
The gross, the subtle and the causal.
ఇంతియే కాక జగత్తునకు ఘనమైనటువంటి యొక్క ప్రకృతి తత్వాన్ని ఇందులో ఇమిడ్చుకుంటూ వచ్చారు.
Here also contained the values, the splendor of the
భూత
world.
భవిష్యత్ వర్తమానముల యందు అంతర్వాహినిగా ప్రవహించేటువంటిది కూడాను తత్వం అసే అని కూడాను నిరూపించారు.
The principle of Tattvamasi flows in all the three times, past, present and future.
కనుక మానవత్వం లోపల ఈ తత్వం అసి అనేటువంటి దానిని ఎంత సులభంగా వారు గుర్తించి ప్రజలకు చాటిస్తూ వచ్చారు.
They have been propagating to people how the principle of Tattvamasi could be explained in the life
నది
of man.
ప్రవహించింది.
The river flows.
ప్రవహించిన నది సముద్రంలో చేరి ఉంది.
It merges into ocean, having flown over.
సముద్రం యొక్క జలము ఆవిరిగా మారింది.
The water of ocean transforms into
ఆవిరి
vapor.
మేఘముగా రూపొందింది.
The vapor becomes clouds.
మేఘము వర్షంగా కూర్చింది.
The clouds rain.
వర్షము తిరిగి వంకలుగా ప్రవహించాయి.
And this rain flows less late.
ఈ వంకలు ఒక నదిగా రూపొందాయి.
They transform into rivers.
ఈ రూపొందినటువంటి నది తిరిగి సముద్రంలో చేరిపోయింది.
The rivers that have come like that way merge into ocean.
కానీ ఈ నది ఎక్కడి నుంచి వచ్చింది?
Where from this river
ఈ
emanates?
నది యొక్క నీరు ఎక్కడిది
Where from the water
అని నదికి
river
ఏమాత్రము
existed?
తెలియదు.
The river doesn't realize this fact.
కానీ చేరిన తర్వాత తత్వం అసి, మేము ఇందు నుంచినే బయలుదేరినటువంటి వారమే, మేము ఇది రెండు ఒక్కటే అని ఆనాడు గుర్తించుకుంటూ వచ్చాయట.
It realizes the fact of the unity when once it gets merged into ocean. We have come out of you and we merged in you.
ఒక విత్తనము భూమిలో నాటినాం.
We have sown a seed in soil.
అది మొక్క రూపమును ధరించింది.
It has grown into sapling.
మొక్క వృక్షంగా రూపొందింది.
It has become a tree.
ఈ వృక్షములో కొమ్మలు, రెమ్మలు, ఆకులు, పువ్వులు, కాయలు, ఫలములు కలిగిజాయి.
The tree has got the branches, the leaves, the flowers and the fruits and so on.
కానీ ఈ కొమ్మలు, ఈ రొమ్మలు, ఈ ఆకులు, ఈ పువ్వులు, ఈ కాయలు, ఈ ఫలములు ఎక్కడి నుంచి వచ్చాయి?
Where from these things existed, the branches, the leaves, the flowers, the unripe fruits and the fruits.
వీటి యొక్క రూపనామములు, రుచి ప్రభావములు వేరు వేరు అయినప్పటికీ ఇవి అన్నీ చేరి ఒక్కటే అనేటువంటి సత్యాన్ని నిరూపించుకుంటూ వచ్చారు ప్రజలు.
People started realizing unity. Their names and forms and tastes may differ, but however they are all one.
ఆ విత్తనంలో ఉండినటువంటి అంకుశం చెప్పుతుండాది తత్వం అసి. ఈ కొమ్మలు, ఈ రెమ్మలు, ఈ పువ్వులు, ఈ కాయలు, ఈ ఫలములు అవన్నీ కూడాను తత్వం నా నుంచి వచ్చినటువంటివి అవన్నీ.
Seeds started declaring, Tattvamasi, from me only the branches, the leaves, the unripe fruits and flowers have come.
కనుకనే ఈ విధమైనటువంటి ఆధారములను పురస్కరించుకొని జగత్ అంతయు కూడాను ఈశావాస్యమిదం జగత్ అని నిరూపిస్తూ వచ్చారు.
They started proving the fact, basing on this example, that Ishavasyamadam Sarvam, God pervades all over.
నీటిలో ఇంత చక్కెరను వేశాము.
You mixed sugar in water.
కానీ దానిని చక్కగా కలిపేటప్పటికీ
When once you mix it
ఆ
properly,
చక్కెర అంతా కూడాను నీటిలో సర్వత్రా వ్యాపించిపోయింది.
the sugar spreads all over the water.
కానీ కంటికి కనిపించదు, చేతికి చిక్కదు.
You cannot see with your physical eye, nor can you capture with the hand.
కానీ చక్కెర లేదా? ఉన్నది.
But is there not sugar? But it exists.
అరూపమై ఉంటున్నది.
It has no form.
అగమ్యమై ఉంటుండాది.
It cannot be seen.
కానీ అది కేవలము జిహ్వకు మాత్రమే అది ఉండినట్టుగా గుర్తించడానికి వీలవుతుంది.
It's possible to realize its existence by way of taste to the tongue.
అప్పుడు గుర్తించినప్పుడు ఏమి చెప్తుందా చక్కెర?
When once it's realized, what is it that sugar says?
తత్వం అసి.
The sugar also says Tattvam Asi.
ఆ మాధుర్యము మాదే.
That sweetness is ours only.
జలముది కాదు ఆ మాధుర్యము.
That sweetness is not due to water.
ఈ విధంగానే భగవంతుడు సర్వవ్యాపి అయి ఉన్నాడు అనేటువంటి సత్యాన్ని ఆనాటి మహర్షులు ఇలాంటి చిన్న చిన్న వాక్యముల చేత ప్రబోధను ప్రచారం చలిపి ఈ తత్వమసి అనేటువంటి యొక్క ఏకత్వాన్ని ప్రబోధిస్తూ వచ్చారు.
Taking such simple examples, Maharshis of ancient times started teaching that God pervades all over the universe.
ఇంతియే కాక మానవుడు తన యొక్క తత్వాన్ని, తన యొక్క జీవితమును, పరిసర ప్రాంతములను గుర్తించుకొనుటకు తగిన ప్రయత్నం కూడాను చేయటం లేదు.
Man is also not making an effort to understand his own nature, to understand his own life principle, nor the environment.
I mean, I think the way Swami explained Tattvamasi through those examples was so beautiful. I mean, it really changed the way you look at it. You know, every time you hear that word Tattvamasi, you always thought, okay, it's some philosophical concept which is so high, and you know, we always tend to think that my time has not yet come for that. But here, when Swami puts it, it's so very simple. And at the end of it, when Swami says, you know, this is what is called as Sarvam Vishnumayam Jagat.
Yes.
Ishavasyamidam Jagat. And it's the same way. I mean, it looks so obvious, you know, the kind of examples which Swami gave, especially when he said, in the seed looks at the branches that flowers and trees and says, Tattvamasi, you all have come from me.
Correct.
I mean, what stops us from saying that, we all have come from God, so Tattvamasi.
It's just the layers of meaning,
Right.
Tattvamasi is true at every level,
Right.
at the physical level, at the mental level. I think we should go one by one.
Yes.
How Swami actually brings out different aspects of this triangle. Initially, he starts with Tat Tvam Asi. He says that which is farthest from the senses, that which is nearest to the senses.
Right.
So what is nearest to the senses is the body. That is Tvam. And Tat is which is farthest from the senses. And Asi, it's the mind that is to bring these two together. I mean, that itself is so beautiful.
Right.
Because as we studied in that 1990 series, Maneva Manushyanam Karanam Bandha Mokshayoho, Swami says, it's the mind that causes either bondage or liberation. And here it gives a very beautiful and new meaning to the whole thing. He says that which is farthest from the senses and that which is nearest to the senses have to be combined.
Right. And Swami goes on to say that, that which is nearest to the senses, which is the body, is the most gross. So Swami says the stula and the sukshma, that which brings the stula and sukshma together is
Yes.
nature, prakriti, Swami says.
Right.
Now, that is what has manifested this most subtle and this gross in one.
Correct.
And that prakriti, Swami says, is represented by tattvam. And
in fact, here it's really not out of place when Swami says that 3 minus 1 is 1.
right.
That example also is so powerful, where he says, if you just remove the Atman, there is no manifestation and there is no reflection. Reflection is the creation, and the medium on which this creation is happening is consciousness. So he says, if you remove the Atman, 3 minus 1 is 1.
Right.
That's all.
The meaning which Swami gives to mind itself is so beautiful in this, where he says it connects this with that, and it says the role of the mind is to connect.
Right.
Which means the role of the mind is not to kind of disown that subtle aspect, not to disown that distant from the mind aspect.
Correct.
The role the mind is meant to play is to connect, which means it has to turn towards the Atman.
Yes, it has to derive the energy from the Atman and from Buddhi, and it has to combine. See, it's like, can I say that this body is not real? No, it is real. I see it. I'm doing things with it. At the same time, can I say this is the only thing that is real?
Right.
There are so many things which I don't see and which are real. So these two facts have to come together. What is seen with what is unseen.
Right.
These two have to combine together and say they are actually not separate. They are one and the same.
And Swami, in another discourse, Swami beautifully says, we use these two words, Satya and Mithya.
Yes.
Swami says, you don't say Satya and Asatya, you say Satya and Mithya. Swami explains, Satya is the truth. Mithya is, it's not the truth, but it appears like the truth.
Right.
Swami says it's not untruth. It is there. As long as you're experiencing it, it is as real as it is there. So Swami says it's not untruth, but it appears like the truth for a short time. So it is Mithya. Swami says.
Then the next level he says Bhakti, Mukti, Rakti. And the desire and the hunger and Mukti. So bhukti is what feeds the body, desire is what feeds the mind, and mukti is what Atma is all about.
Right.
So that is the second layer of the triangle.
Right. And it also explains how when Swami says the desire which the mind carries is actually what your personality is.
Correct.
If the desires are all centered around the gross part, which is the body, then the more you are, not grounded, but you're kind of caught up in the gross aspect of life. And the more the desires, I mean, it's the same desires. It's not like, it's not a different mind altogether. The same mind entertaining desires towards the Atman.
Yes.
Towards the subtle aspect actually takes you closer to this one. And that's why Swami says the role of that, the way Swami puts it, the characteristic of the mind is to merge the distant Atma with the proximate body.
Exactly. So next layer of the triangle is Bhakti, Mukti and Rakti. Then we go on to the next layer of the triangle. He says that is past, present and future.
My God.
That is also a part of Tattvamasi. And after that comes this beautiful analogy of the water cycle, as we may call it. I mean, entire life itself can be explained as through this water cycle. He says, you are the same water that goes into the ocean, that evaporates, that forms the clouds, that come as rain. Again, it flows back as the river to the ocean. And possibly you could do 100 million things before you actually reach the ocean again. But eventually you have to reach the ocean.
Right. There is this, I don't know which Upanishad it comes. There is a line where the aspirant looks at the sun and says, you may look so brilliant and all that, but you and I are one.
Okay.
There's a verse. And I think it's Venkataraman's favorite way of explaining it. How he speaks about the Big Bang Theory.
Yes.
And how elements start getting created. And how those elements eventually become minerals. And he says that those minerals still become a part of your body.
Yes.
So it is absolutely nothing wrong when you imagine that moment of Big Bang and say that you and I are one in that.
Very true.
He says scientifically it's true. Because, imagine when we are all born, we are just 3 kgs, 3.5 kgs. Hopefully we were healthy infants. And that 3 kg form has become a 80, 85, 90 kg form. It has done it through the process of gathering elements from around you. And how can we say that, I am separate from nature, I am a different entity, and the world around me is separate from me? I mean, it's almost like, as one of the thinkers says, there is a pot of water, you pick up a handful of water and drop it back inside.
Okay.
So you can't say which was the drop you picked up, which was the drop you put back. And that is our existence. In this nature, and we are saying that I'm an entity, individual entity, you're an individual entity, but it's like droplets of water in the pot.
In fact, another classic example is that of a wave in an ocean.
Right, exactly.
As the wave is rising up, it assumes an individuality of its own. But in an instant, it's back part of the ocean.
Right. And the thing is, some of these things we observe every day in life, but why is it that we are not able to extend it to the creator, to the source? As Swami does it, it looks so obvious. After Swami gave these 3 or 4 examples, as you said, of the water cycle and then the plants. And then he says, that is why the rishis said the entire universe abides in God.
Right.
And that is why that you and I are God is such an obvious thing, even logically. Right? It sounds suddenly so obvious. Yeah, if somebody has created us, and as Swami would beautifully say that I separated myself from myself, then how can you start saying that, I am separate from the Lord?
It's like the clay doll. If you have made a clay doll, is the clay separate from the doll? Or can the doll exist without the clay? I mean, it's the clay that has made the doll, and every aspect of the doll is made with that same clay.
Right.
So you cannot say that there is no clay in the doll. At the same time, you cannot say that there is no doll in the clay.
Right. I think another typical example is that, when you look up at the sky and you see these cloud formations,
right,
and suddenly somebody will say, that looks like a peacock, or, hey, that looks like, an elephant.
In fact, somebody sent a very beautiful picture from the US on Shivaratri day, where the cloud formation,
perfectly like a lingam.
Beautiful Shivlingam.
Right.
It was
So I think that comes from recognition, right? You have seen a form and you're all the time trying to correlate this form with that form. But from the point of view of the clouds, it's just randomly forming some things and going along.
Right.
So I think that's the same thing. We are so interested with forms.
Yeah. See, what is it that defines something as a form and something not as a form? That is the mind.
Right.
That's what Swami is saying. It's the duty of the mind to combine the two. The seen and the unseen. It's the mind. The mind is always the one that plays the game.
Right.
And mind is again the one that... So, here, of course, it's a slight digression from what Swami is talking here. But that beautiful example of bhakti and jnana, where Swami says that watchdog, Maya,
right,
is there at the entrance of the house. If you stand at the gate and shout out to the Lord will look and say, hey, keep quiet. And then you can walk in. That is Bhakti Marga.
Right.
If you have the capacity, you make friends with the dog and walk in. That is Jnana Marga.
Right.
So either ways, if you want to reach the goal of knowing your true identity, you have to do something. You have to do something to realize that you don't have to do anything.
Right. And Swami says that is done using the mind, because that is the one which bridges the body with the Atman. And disadvantage of doing a program like this is we'll have to wait till the next week to continue the discourse. Of course, the discourse is always available for people who want to listen to it. But of course, the advantage is to absorb this material in a slow manner.
Right.
To take it slowly.
Mananam part of it.
Really, what a beautiful clip, this one part where Tattvamasi. I'm very thankful I didn't go through the discourse before, because the surprise was so beautiful to listen to it. And each time Swami saying Tattvamasi, and so beautiful. So dear listeners, you'll have to wait for 1 week, but do join us next week for the continuation of this discourse. This is Prem from Team Radio Sai, and with me is Sai Prakash. We humbly offer this effort at Swami's lotus feet. Thank you. Jai Sai Ram.